Welcome to Heart Riffing, a podcast by way of the heart. Here we explore what it means to reconnect with your essence and live from a place of personal freedom. If you're interested in learning more about our courses, mentoring and workshops, feel free to visit wayoftheheart.com.au. We're so glad you're here and we hope you enjoy the episode. Hi and welcome back to Heart Riffing, a podcast by way of the heart. You're joining us for episode 33. Bello, do you want to introduce this one or shall I?
You introduce it, yeah.
Okay, so for today's episode, we wanted to do it on the topic of the way. Shocker, way of the heart. But we also kind of wanted to look at this idea of the way as something that exists independent of us. Like it's not, I think that a lot of people tend to live, myself included, as though like you're the center of everything. We tend to live like we're in a bit of a main character moment where everything revolves around us. And I think that we also look at the way as this kind of like disembodied thing that you need to discover in order to live it. But it sort of actually exists outside and independently of us. So I feel like maybe a good place to start might be, what are we talking about when we're talking about the way, or this idea of the way?
Yep. Okay. My introduction to the idea of the way came essentially through reading what's called the Tao Te Ching, which was written by Lao Tzu or Lao Tzu, depending on how you pronounce his name. And basically, in the Tao Te Ching, there is the introduction to this thing called the Tao, which is T-A-O. It's not Tao, but their T's are D, so it's the Tao. And the fundamental idea in Taoism is that that the whole universe, everything that we experience as reality, has a Tao, has a way. So Taoism is like way or path or not even process, just a way. That everything that exists has inherently built into it its own Tao, its own way. And so this is the elemental. It's such an elemental thing, but it drives everything. You could talk about the way of a dolphin porpoising through the water. Through the water. That's the way they do it up, down. You could talk about. We've just had beautiful birds on the balcony sitting there, and we have two cats, and it's just the way of cats to see the birds and to go, no, I don't like them. Yeah. And they don't even, and they go right into their felineness because they make a funny little croaky noise, which is kind of, I don't know, it's like they're mumbling under their breath or something. It's not a meow. It's a scratchy kind of,
like a weird chattering.
I'm going to kick your. It's a chattering, yeah. That's the way of cats when they see something that they, when they're being a predator or they're, about to hunt something. And what the Taoist observation was that when they went into nature, what they observed was that everything, like every living thing, had its own way. The seasons have their own way. The leaves falling off the trees have their own way. Plants have their own way. Animals have their own way. And so consequently, we have our own way as well. And you can apply that to your own life and see yourself as unique in that every person as their own kind of form, in their own body, in their own incarnation, has their own way. It's not the same as the karmic curriculum of, say, Hinduism, or it's not, say, the Dharma, as in your duty. It's not far from those ideas, but it's more mysterious than those ideas. So it's not leveraging the way of the soldier as if, here is a duty-bound individual that has been enlisted to behave a particular way. And it's not the same as divine calling that you would find, say, in Christianity, that you have a call and a gift and you have a mission a mission in life to serve others, or it's none of that. It's more just the fact that when you look at it, there's something operating that compels all of life to behave a particular way, to follow a particular path. So that's the way. And maybe one of their central observations also was that way seems to come before everything, right? So that way is not a product of something. That way actually almost predates existence. And so you're born into the way, you know what I mean? And even though you can't name it, or you can't necessarily identify it in a concrete way, they would say, yes, that's right, because way comes before words. Way comes before definitions. Way isn't something that you can bottle and commodify. Way isn't even something that you can understand. Way is a primal driver. It's something that works through you, and it's something that you align yourself to, that you give yourself to, or consequently you don't give yourself to. And when you don't give yourself to it, then you find yourself disaligned. So it's more, way is more access through this idea of attunement and alignment. And when you're not attuned and you're not aligned, and you live outside of Tao, outside of way, or even in opposition to way, then inevitably that invites dislocation, and all the kind of disharmony, discord, dissonance. Put anything with the DIS in front of it. It creates that kind of pain in our life because we're not walking in the way, we're not flowing with the way. So that's kind of the where I landed on it. And I really like that idea. And I really built that into Way of the Heart. That our heart has a way, that our heart knows this way. Yeah.
So it's like a natural flow, or it's like the rhythm that underpins everything. And like different forms have their own way, but it's all like everything has its own way, and that's all interconnected.
Yeah, I mean, their position, Tao's position would be that way impacts everything.
Yeah.
They're not talking about God. They're not talking about anything mythological or anything even theological. Right. So it's not like the Christian God that sustains all things through sovereignty and through providence and stuff like that. It's not. No, they're not saying it. No, it's not out there. It's completely embodied. It's not out there in the heavens, and from the heavens the Lord reigns and rules. It's more like, no, within every single living form, within every manifestation, there is a way. There is a pathway that this thing is going to take. And to the degree that you flow with that pathway and flow on that pathway, you'll experience kind of a oneness or a peace or an alignment with life, and you'll flow with life. And if you oppose it, then you'll experience a resistance in life. And they were really careful not to try and pierce the mystery of way. They weren't interested in defining it. Zhuangzi says, I go looking for it and there's nothing to find.
Okay.
And he goes, and that doesn't make it any more real, but it doesn't make it any less real either, which is a really, which again is a classic Taoist kind of comment. He says, there's something going on and I go and look for it and I can't find anything. And he goes, so I think in my head, maybe this thing isn't real.
Yeah, right.
And he goes, but it is real because there's something going on. It's just I can't find it. I don't know how to name it. And that goes back to the very first lines of the Tao Te Ching, which kind of start in mystery, where it says, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. It's fundamentally saying, if you try and name it or you try and tell it, well, then you're not, whatever you're talking about probably isn't it.
Yeah.
Right?
So
it frustrates the mind.
So end of episode. End of episode.
End of episode.
Well, I don't know. I feel like the question from here is like, what do you do with that? Where do you take that? Like, how does that begin to inform or shape things. Or the way that we originally framed this episode was the way that existed before you, it will exist after you. It's not like your secret purpose in life is to find your own way. It's like, no, it's to tap into and be more attuned to the way that you are already part of.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So, yeah.
So what, were you asking this so what question already?
I don't think I'm asking so what, but I think I'm saying, where do you go from there, you know? Like, where do we take this?
Well,
It could go anywhere.
Well, it could go anywhere, or the only thing that's really being precluded or excluded by not naming it and not being able to talk about it at length or with any kind of forensic depth is the brain, is the logical brain that wants to classify it, wants to understand it, wants to reduce it down to a series of 10 points, wants to turn it into a growth framework and wants to send it out there, flick it off to, some life coach and say, pump this sucker out, boys, this will make a fortune, So the only thing that's really being precluded is our logical prefrontal cortex that thinks, if it doesn't land logically in my brain and if I can't commodify it and break it down into a framework, then it has no real application. Completely wrong, because we're kind of under the deception that our brains are the only vehicle that we can use to make sense of the world, right? And that's actually not the case. I mean, in one of the things that I get out of Ayurvedic concepts is the idea of mind, where mind is not just the product of logic. So Ayurvedic concepts would be that you have this circle, call it the mind, and that the mind is fed by a bunch of different sources, a bunch of different consciousnesses or awarenesses, right? One of them is, the gross physical world that we interact with, that we can see, touch, taste, smell, and engage. And that our external senses, or our senses that take external objects and internalize it, then hit our brain and then feed mind. And we would call that a mind-body relationship, right? And that's the impact of the external world on through our senses on our brains and bodies, which then feed what you could broadly call the mind, right? But then there's an internal register as well, which doesn't work through the five senses. It works through intuition. It works through pattern recognition. It works through sensing. It works through a whole lot of far finer, far more subtle, almost unlearnt perceptions. The mother that looks at a baby and automatically knows, the capacity to thin slice, where you just need a glimpse and automatically, as soon as you've had a glimpse, you go, I know what's going on there. This is what you would call things that register in your heart. And so your heart not as a physical organ, but your heart as recognizing patterns, recognizing themes, sensing tone, sensing attunement, aware of alignment, aware of harmony, aware of clarity. You're playing with things like clarity, playing with things like bliss, the heart that can enter into a bliss state and go, yes, this. So it's not a mind that's going, this is right. It's a heart that's going, this feels completely perfect, or a heart that can experience disquiet, or a heart that knows to step up and be courageous. So think of all the metaphors around the heart: the courageous heart, the brave heart, the lion-hearted person, the big-hearted person. There's so many references that we have as humans to the heart and how the heart operates in us. We just think they're all metaphor or simile, right? But they're actually talking about how there's an organ of the soul, as it were. If the brain is the organ of the senses and of the mind body relationship, then the heart is the organ of the mind soul relationship, right? And so the whole mind soul relationship is also a data center. It also feeds information. It also feeds understanding to the mind, but it bypasses cognition. It bypasses prefrontal cortex. So it's a felt knowing. It's a felt insight. It's experienced. It's a feeling sense. It's not a logical sense, right? So that all feeds mind. So you find that the human mind is a conglomerate, not just of logical thoughts and narratives that have been processed through prefrontal cortex, big brain, and drop down as what we call the truth. People construct truth through that, yes, but they also construct truth and interact with reality through a soul-mind relationship, not just a mind-body relationship, right? So if you say, okay, so where does Tao sit? Well, Tao sits in the finer space of a soul-mind relationship. And the Taoists were really big on this. They were really big on saying, this is not something that you try and get your brain around. This is something that you feel. You can feel that everything has a way. You can feel that you're doing something and it feels completely incongruent to you. And you go, I'm not meant to be doing this. No one's told you you're not meant to do it. It's just you feel, and you have an understanding in your mind, which is not just your logic. You have a feeling in your body as a knowing in yourself. And you go, oh, okay, that isn't the right way to go. I mean, we said it recently when we tried some things with Way of the Heart, in terms of just ways that we were putting our material out there. And we finished it and we looked at each other and we went, this just isn't landing for me. This isn't it. And you went, no, this is not us. This is not. And you go, well, logically it is us because we just did it and we need to do it and blah, blah, blah. You could make a logical argument for it.
Yeah.
Right? But then there's another part of you that goes, oh, no.
Yeah.
That's not it.
Yeah.
At least the way that we did it this time isn't it. Maybe we'll rebrand that or put that out there or.
Yeah, this leads to like another conversation that I wanted to say for another episode, but I feel like this is probably a good spot to bring it in as well, is this idea of like internal knowing. When you drop into your heart space in and around making a decision about whatever it is, it could be a relationship, it could be a job, it could be a life direction, whatever, you will have an internal sense of the way to go, the correct way to go.
Yeah.
Now, you might not know any of the detail in and around that, and that's when you see people who tie themselves up in knots going, look, I don't know, should I stay with them, should I not stay with them, like I don't know if I love them or not, or maybe they're really good on paper. And it's like, if you actually suspended your emotional energy and your mental energy and all the narratives that you're spinning and all the hoops that you're jumping through, if you suspended that for 30 seconds and you actually dropped into your heart space and you ignored everything else and you just became still and you were to ask yourself, is this right? You would have a gut response to that. And then almost immediately the attachment kicks in and then all the narratives come back again.
Yeah.
But when we talk about way and when we talk about knowing, that's your heart, the part of you that really does actually know.
Yeah, that's the soul mind connection. So that's the inner connection to mind that goes through heart, as opposed to the external sensory brain that is processing external data, and that's going through to mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a mind-body connection, and that's a mind-soul connection. And what you're talking about, what you're articulating there, is that mind-soul connection through the heart is often really, really clear. Really clear.
Yeah, and often painfully clear too, because it might contradict your narrative or your attachment.
Well, yeah, of course, it often runs up against attachments. And so this is where the conversation about walking in the way is really interesting, because walking in the way is not walking in just human logic. It's not walking in the way of unrestrained ego or unrestrained desire. Walking in the way is attuning to the mind-soul relationship where you're observing the pattern. So you could, the Taoists would talk about the unchopped block of wood before it's carved, right? So the classic unchopped block is the sculptor is going to carve something out of the raw block of wood, right? But the block of wood comes with its own way. It comes with the way that the grain moves. It comes with the way that there's a knot here and there's this there, and And so the excellent craftsman works according to what's there. They plane with the grain. They carve around the knot. They what is inside the block is already kind of predicts what the sculpture is going to be. So there's these classic stories about the wood carver that goes walking through the wood, and they're looking at the wood and they're already visualizing, and what they're seeing is they're seeing the end product that exists in the uncarved block, right? It's a beautiful metaphor, but it's the same thing. It's like you can't see something if you haven't carved it. How can you see that it's there, right? No, you can't literally see it. It's not a mind-body connection thing where you literally see something. It's you're going to feel your way into that space more than you're going to physically attain it. It's not a physical attainment or a physical acquisition in terms of a brain connection. It's going to be something far more subtle than that. For me, most of the time, it's pattern recognition. And sometimes it's pattern recognition within just the way my body unconsciously responds to situations. I find myself like, you said it the other day, we were running a meeting together the other day and I was reading scripts, and reading scripts for me is really not me. Like it's not, I can riff, I can talk off the cuff until the cows come home. But I don't read scripts well. And this whole thing was like I was reading scripts. And what happened is I have a little persona that when I'm feeling pushed into a corner, which I was by reading scripts, I have a person called Charlie the Kid that comes out and plays and wants to be mischievous. And so I was starting to get a bit mischievous. And Jess goes, listen, just dial Charlie the Kid back. We don't need Charlie the Kid here, And then later on she came back to me and she said, when Charlie the Kid started to come out in that meeting the other day, I realized there's no point getting you to read scripts because we just definitely don't need Charlie the Kid who wants to mess things up and play games there, right? And it's like, and that was really good observation for me because I go, yeah, when I find myself in situations where I'm playing a role or really going against the flow of who I naturally am, yeah, Charlie's going to turn up. I'm going to start misbehaving. I've already said that many times, I start misbehaving. Not badly misbehaving, I don't go out and let people's tires down or do anything really naughty like that. Well,
that's a good idea for next time.
Yeah. But, I have a way. I have a way that when I get under pressure, I look for a release valve through Charlie the Kid and if I can't have a release valve and the situation gets critical, I have a persona called the terrorist who just comes and blows everything up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of getting more into family systems, but it's also aligned to how Bello operates, how Bello turns up.
Yeah.
It's not that I can fully articulate that, but Bello turns up a particular way.
The way of Bello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But then, so how does that link back into you tapping into a way that existed before you and will exist after you?
Yeah. So I think that when you look at that, we're looking at that within the context of my own individuality. You know what I mean? But that's also in harmony with everything else. Like we were saying in the last podcast, I exist in a complex ecosystem where things all fit together, where personal identity is porous. We talked about the tree, pull it out of the ground. So my way is not just an isolated way that lives separate from everyone else. My way is embedded into the way of everything else going on, like the tree. The tree is embedded into the soil, the way of the soil. The soil is embedded into the way of the sky, in terms of the sky providing sunlight, in terms of the sky providing water, in terms of the sky providing photosynthesis. So you start to see that, this is actually a whole invisible network.
And then like the aha moment in that, or the good moment, I don't know, the fruit in that is that like you don't have to strive to keep that going, that
Yeah.
that is self perpetuating.
Yeah, that is the big aha moment.
Right. Because there's something that you can rest in. You can rest in that. Not that like you don't work, not that like life doesn't involve working, but like that flow is self-sustaining.
Well, that flow's been there since before time. That's the in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao existed before God, before anything, you know. Um, so they recognize that this inherent way of things is just elemental. It's just fundamental to everything, and it's the ground of which everything emerges in accordance with that, and that's why it all works. That's why the universe works. That's why the earth works. That's why the tides work. That's why when the tide goes out, the little mud crabs can come out of their holes and scrabble up on the sand and find some scraps. And then the tide comes in and they're all rushing back down their holes again. And, that's why the whole thing actually keeps operating. Now we can wax lyrical about that as much as we want. The better thing to do is to go, maybe ask the question, am I deeply held by this universe?
Mm.
Is my life sacred? Not because of some, not because of some theological idea, not because of a religious idea, but is my life sacred because it is part of a web of life that is flowing a particular way, and that is uniquely provided for, and that my life will blossom just like a flower will blossom under the right conditions. Now, someone might come interfere and cut the plant, rip the bud off the tree. There's no doubt that there's violence and there's disruption and there's trauma and there's all those sort of things. But at a purely natural level, there's a way, right? And the closer we get back to nature, the closer we get back to that way and allowing that way, the more likely life is to unfold in a restful, peaceful, non-grasping process.
I feel like we've had similar conversations and I've had similar questions that come up. But like, yes, when you get back to the natural part of everything, there's a way and it flows. And it's nice to say that the universe has your back, but like, there are people dying everywhere all the time. So it's like the universe has your back so long as you have this amount of wealth and this amount of security and this cultural or racial background. And do you know what I mean? Saying that the universe has your back is different to it's different when you say that to a rich white person in comparison to
most
a
rich
person of color who is living in a war-torn country.
Well, the classic thing about that is that most rich white people don't experience it because they're so busy thinking that all their possessions and their assets and their jobs and all their external attachments actually provide life for them. So some of the most bereft people on the planet are people who think that they're in control and constantly try and control a life that can't be controlled.
Yeah.
So it sounds good to say that, poverty and war and suffering clearly indicate that the world is a violent place and that there is no way except the way of violence. But you go to, I've been to places like India. I've been to the back blocks of central India and met still tribes people that live in tents, and they have their way. They have a rhythm to their life. They still have kids. They still live out. I was in Morocco and, right out in the middle of the Atlas Mountains, and went and sat in a small room with a traditional Moroccan Berber family, where, they're just in this, and they're nomadic. They're essentially nomadic, and they travel around with their goats, and they have a way that this is the way that they've been doing it forever and a day. And we come into it as a Westerner and go, I could not live like that. I mean, the poverty, you go, the poverty is, yeah, but there's rich relationships there. There's a husband and a wife. There's a relationship to the animal. He knows where to take the animals to keep them fed. They follow him naturally. She has a couple of geese there. The geese lay her, like it all just, it doesn't flow like, they don't have a yacht and they don't go on holidays to Thailand, to Phuket or Bali or, that they don't, but they don't have a life that values that anyway. So they have their own way. Now it's not my way, but they have a rhythm and a pattern to life. The way that you land this is you identify that this is not esoteric at all. This is the way is a physical reality. Tallowood trees grow a particular way. They have bark on them in a particular way. They grow in particular places. They don't grow in other particular places. So, okay, so take it out of the nature piece. But see, we can take it out of the nature piece, but then we're suggesting that we're not nature. We're not nature.
Yes.
Where we completely are nature.
Yeah. That's the thing. That's what makes this so complicated, because you go, oh, well, the trees are one thing, but humans are so much more sophisticated. But it's like, I think that's an illusion in and of itself.
That's a complete illusion. And the other big illusion is that we always want to sanitize. We want to say, well, the way works great until bad shit happens, as if bad shit wasn't part of the way.
Which is like, and I hate that question. I hated that question when I was religious too. It's like, why does God let bad things happen to good? And I feel like it's such a reductive, basic question.
Yeah, so if you're asking that.
Sorry. You're basic and reductive. No, you're not.
So all of you who are thinking that question are now never listening to the podcast again.
No.
Jess is so mean.
I'm so sorry.
She's such a meanie.
No. I think it's a really valid question, but I think that that question comes from or operates within one particular worldview. To going back to that word again, or one particular mindset. And I feel like when you're asking that question, you have almost like a fixed idea of what the answer should be, in the same way as asking like, well, 1 + 1 = 2, right? Well, depends which way you look at it. That's what we were talking about the other day. So I feel like that question of, well, explain bad things, it's like you're asking that with an idea in mind of how that answer is going to go.
Yeah, because this comes down to something that Watts was really good at highlighting, and that is that the way that we've been trained to think is often not even remotely connected to reality. So to take the 1 + 1 analogy that you just were referring to, we say, what is 1 + 1? The short numerical answer is 2. And then what they do is what Watts would say was, well, if I have one cloud and I add another cloud to it, well, do I have 2 clouds? And you actually have one. You still have one cloud. So, the naff point that was being made was basically that sometimes 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, but it equals absorption, which still equals 1.
Yeah.
Right. So, and actually, if you said, how often is that the case? You would go, there's lots of times when that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
If I have one body of water called the river and it flows into the sea, do I have 2 bodies of water? No, I actually have it's all just water.
Mm-hmm.
We identify the river for the sake of saying, well, that's a river because it goes up through a thin valley, and then we go, oh no, and that's an ocean. And you go, but it's all water. It's all the same water. There's not a point at which the river gets to come down and go, I'm graduating, I'm now becoming an ocean. And we throw a party because you've just become an ocean. How good. Well done for you.
So then, what's the river, ocean, body of water answer to?
Well, water has a way. Water flows. Water always has the lowest point. This was, again, a big Taoist point. Water's a great indicator because water has a particular way. You put water at the top of a hill, it's going to find the lowest point at the bottom of the hill.
What? So violence has a way?
Sorry, you were referring to.
Yeah, so it's what's the water version of that? Why do bad things happen?
Well, because because if there's such a thing as black, there also has to be a thing as white. Sound is a combination of noises and silence, right? Of no sound. It's a combination of both, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a combination of just all noise. It's a combination of frequency or vibration and then silence. And there's a gap in that. It's the idea that we have an idea that a good life is when no bad things happen to us, but a good life where nothing bad happens to you probably ends up being a case where you don't grow because adversity creates, some degree of adversity mm-hmm. creates resilience. Mm-hmm. Some degree of adversity or suffering creates perseverance. And so you look at life, and life seems to have these polarities, but then you put the polarities together and they all become one. So we understand what joy is because we know what sorrow is. We understand what happiness is because we understand what true sadness is. We understand what connection is because we understand what solitude feels like. So like all of these things, they actually feed off one another. You literally cannot have one without the other because the other one wouldn't exist. It needs its mate. It needs its pair. And when you put them together, that's a wise life. A wise life puts those together. Wisdom brings what seems oppositional and sees the connection between both. And now in our conversation around way includes both. Otherwise it wouldn't be way, mm-hmm. right? And so when we're asking that very sanitized question, it's like, well, why are they suffering? It's like, there is suffering in this world. I mean, it's just a point of fact. There is suffering in this world, right? And way of the heart, but way of the heart isn't, seeking to, I'm not Miss World pageant, I just want global peace. I don't, well, yeah, if I could have it, that'd be great. But the reality is that even within those people who are suffering or worse off or, in a war or whatever it is, they still have a way. There's still a way. There's still a way for them to be. You know what I mean? That's the whole point in way. Is that there's still something that they can drop into and go, this is the natural flow of my life.
I feel like that helps land it a bit. I think the thing that I have trouble with is this idea that you mentioned where you're like, do you trust that the universe has your back? And it's like, well, to say that kind of presupposes that has your back equals good outcome.
Yeah, well, that's a good observation. But I don't think it's about good outcome. I think it's about if you're in a time of war and your life is being threatened, you will be stripped back to the essentials. And when you're stripped back to the essentials, what you'll have is yourself and way. Your ability to just be you. That'll be about all you have. Because all the roles will be bullshit, or because your house might be gone or your family might be gone, then you're primarily just left with self. The reality of every old person whose partner dies before them and they're sitting in their house by themselves and they go, what the hell was this whole thing about? This whole thing was just a dance where you were allowed to turn up and dance the way that you wanted to dance. The great regret of some people is they get to their front porch in latter years of their life and they go, I never danced my dance. I never followed my way. I always followed some other person's way. Why was I so bewitched and beguiled? Why was I so deceived into thinking that was important when in reality what was in my heart was this, and that's what I should have been doing? No one ever gets to the end and goes, oh, well, I was so glad my life was dominated by everyone else's desire for what it was. Mm-hmm. People get to the end of their life and they go, like, there was one lady I remember, she was dying and she had motor neurone disease and, she'd fought a long, hard fight and she was literally about 3 months from passing away. And I interviewed her with a group of people and her name was Sybil. And I said to Syb, I said, when you look back over your life, do you have any regrets? Well, that's a big question to ask someone who's about 3 months away from dying. And she goes, yeah, I do. And I thought, this is going to be groundbreaking, right? Like, everyone hold your seats. She goes, I wish I'd bred more puppies. And I just went, that's she loved animals. She loved breeding puppies. She loved having them around. It was just her thing, you know. And she looks back over her life and goes, yeah, that was me. I should have done more of that. I wish I had an opportunity to do more of that. Oh, that's Sib's thing. That's Sib's way. That was her orientation.
So when you say like the universe has your back, it's more like when you return to your way, the thing that is you, that is sufficient in and of itself.
It is. It's sufficient in and of itself, even in adversity, even in loss, even in suffering. And dare I say it, it's sufficient even in joy and happiness and fulfillment. Yes. It's sufficient all the time.
Yeah. This is like, I was having this conversation with a friend the other day about Way of the Heart, and I was just talking about some of the complexities around running a business. I mean, like, we're in the first sort of 6 months of launch. I'm not a business person, so we're kind of earning our stripes in terms of figuring out how to run this thing called Way of the Heart. And I was talking about just how difficult it was and how it's really challenging. But like, the difficulty of not doing this is worse, because like, if I was to not do this, I would not be in alignment with what my heart is telling me I should be doing.
Yeah.
And like, the pain of not following my heart it's gut-wrenching, it's violent, it feels really incongruent. I would much rather do the hard work of this and learning what I need to learn in this, having that internal knowing that this is in alignment with who I am, completely, as opposed to betraying that.
Yeah, completely. So I think that's a beautiful analogy, is you just go, the road that you're walking at the moment has complexity, it has challenges, it challenges you to the core of your being, but you go, this is my way. And if I was to go against Tao, if I was to step out of Tao and oppose Tao, that's when the real pain happens, right? Because that's when that's when you do the soul violence. We're talking about this as a soul-mind relationship.
That's how that ties in.
That is how that ties in.
Got it. Blended.
Okay, so think of it, the mind-body relationship. Your mind looks, your eyes look down at a hot plate, a red hot plate, right? Or a stovetop. And you might have done this, you cook something in the oven, right? In a steel, humans are so crazy. You cook something in the oven with in a steel pot. Ange baked some bread the other day in a steel pot, like cast iron bread. It's been in there enough to make the bread rise, so it's hot, right? And you look at it and you open the thing up and you think, I'm just going to pick that up, and I've got 2 little tea towels. It's like,
nah.
Where was the mind body connection, short circuit?
Yeah.
What part of the sensory organism did not see that was a steaming hot piece of cast iron, and when you pick it up through a flimsy little tea towel, there's every possibility that you could be a criminal now because you will not have fingerprints. Yeah. like go into a life of crime because I got no fingers left, right? It's a mind-body disconnect, and it causes pain. Mm-hmm. When you have a soul-mind disconnect, you're not following Tao, not following the pattern, not following the inner pattern. Mm-hmm. Right? Exactly what you said. Not connecting to the inner rhythm, not attuning, not aligning. Yeah, you'll have the same pain as when you burn your fingers off with the cast iron. You'll have inner pain. Mm-hmm. You'll have all the stuff that comes with inner pain. Now, in Way of the Heart, we're going to contend that leads to things, again, like anxiousness, like depression, like lack of confidence, personal insecurity, breakdown in relationships, graspiness in relationships. The person who's not inwardly fulfilled, they start to look for other people to supplement that feeling of not being fulfilled. Mm-hmm. They start to blame other people. Mm-hmm. Well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. They, the old rule, whatever you internalize and suppress, you end up projecting, So So you don't follow way, you feel depressed about your life, and then you look around and you find all the reasons out there why your life isn't what it should be.
Yeah.
But there's been that inner betrayal. There's been that inner breach between your soul and your mind. In other words, it's a heart-mind connection, not a brain-mind connection. You violate either, it causes pain. So what your analogy is a brilliant analogy, because it's like, yeah, this is hard, but not anywhere near as hard as not following way.
And I think like where this ties back in really well with the original topic, which was that like way exists outside of you, and it has always existed outside of you. I think that this ties in well there because the presupposition that it exists outside of you means that there's no amount of contrived action that you can take to alter that way or to change that way.
No, I don't think you can change it. When we say that it exists outside of you, all we're saying is that it exists both in you and it exists outside of you. It is, maybe it has 1,000 other names in different cultures. It is, like I mentioned Bergenson before, but the elan vital, the vital impetus that drives life. The thing that I don't know what makes a tree grow or a plant grow or or fruit, but there's some energy that is being, I know there's a scientific answer to all of that, but that's really just an observance of elements, right? But there's a vital energy that's being sucked up out of the ground and causing this thing to do this and to lean that way and to produce this fruit. So so it's right to say that it exists everywhere outside of you. It's also right to say that it exists inside you as well. What it's not right to say is it's not right to say that it's dependent upon you, right? It's not dependent upon you. It is something that you give yourself to begin to observe through subtle consciousness, through observing patterns, rhythms, observing the way that you operate, observing the way you interact. I go into a room. I can go into a room and automatically I can feel the room, the presence of the room. This is what maybe more discerning people would call discernment of the field. You go into a party and you can automatically sense what's going on. You can automatically sense who is receptive to talk to and who isn't. And I don't think that's an extraordinary skill. I think that's just a reading the patterns, reading the rhythms. So I think there's a way. It's not dependent on us. It does hold things together. It does cause life. When we align to it, there is flow, there is rhythm. It is natural. When we oppose it, it causes pain. I don't know. Summed it up?
I think so.
Happy to get your feedback on any of this. I hope you've enjoyed this one. It's a big topic and there's been a lot of literature written on it, but it's definitely, as it sits as a soul mind connection, as a heart mind connection, it's really worth you investigating it. There's a lot of work being done on mind-body connection and the body keeping score and what that means for the way that we think and approach life and how that regulates a whole lot of stuff. But there's also the soul, or the heart-mind connection, and that's about subtle consciousness and it's about finding way in this regard. So, hope you enjoyed it.
See you next time. Thank you for listening to Heart Riffing. If today's conversation resonated, you can find more of our work, including courses, mentoring, and workshops, at www.wayoftheheart.com.au or on our Instagram, Way of the Heart Official. We'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, or questions, so please always feel free to message or comment. We look forward to seeing you next time.